Hej, 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 witamy w kujawsko-pomorskiej e-Szkole. Dzisiaj z nami, jak zawsze, pan Maciej Doksa. Witam bardzo serdecznie.
Dzień dobry.
Pan Maciej poprowadzi dla nas język angielski dla szkół średnich. A jaki będzie temat tej dzisiejszej lekcji?
Dzisiaj porozmawiamy sobie o Ameryce, a dokładnie o Nowym Jorku. Good afternoon. Holidays are coming very fast, so it is quite possible that some of you will be able to travel the world. Maybe you will end up as far as America. So today I have decided to tell you a few words about America, what places to visit. Originally, I was going to talk about all the interesting places and sites in America, in all America. However, I quickly realized while preparing for this lesson that in the space of 30 minutes that we have for a lesson, it is actually impossible to talk in any great detail about America as a whole, about interesting places to see in the whole of America, because there is so many. So instead of doing a lesson about America, I have decided to focus on one place which is also full of interesting places and is probably one of the most often visited sites of America and the most popular city, New York. New York, as you probably know, of course, is not the capital of America. The capital is the city of Washington, Washington, D.C., but New York is the largest and the most popular city in America. It is, as you probably know, situated on the east coast of America, so on the Atlantic shore. And as I said, it is full of interesting sites, full of interesting places to visit. I'm pretty sure that you have seen a lot of these places in American movies so far, because American film industry very often uses a lot of these sites as the backdrop of many American films. So today I'm going to talk about, well, the places which in my opinion are probably the most worth seeing in America. So let's start with the Manhattan Island. Of course, everybody knows Manhattan, everybody knows that this is a synonym of a city full of skyscrapers. So here in this picture you can see the so-called Manhattan skyline. What is the Manhattan skyline? What's a skyline? A skyline is basically the view from a distance of a city, so you don't see maybe the city in great detail, but at least you see the outline of the buildings, and because it is usually shown against the backdrop of a sky, we call it a skyline. So this is Manhattan skyline, and if you look at this picture you will clearly see how amazing this island is, because it is covered with buildings, with skyscrapers from side to side. There's no empty space. This is probably the most expensive land to buy and to build on in the entire world. So every little inch of land is used there. It's precious. Of course, you probably know that the New York skyline has changed over the years, also because of the September 11 tragedy. So there's no longer, there are no longer the World Trade Towers, but still it is quite impressive. And as you see, it is actually an island. The whole part of New York is covered with skyscrapers. Manhattan Island also constitutes one of the boroughs of New York. What are the boroughs of New York. These are like the big districts of New York. The entire city of New York is divided into 5 boroughs, in other words, districts. Manhattan is one of them. The other ones are the Bronx, Brooklyn, Queens, and Staten Island. Of course, you have heard about the Bronx, you have heard about Brooklyn. I'm pretty sure you have also heard about Queens. These are the most popular districts of New York. Staten Island may be less popular in, let's say, popular culture, but it is also one of the great districts of New York. All right, so speaking of the districts, the next district after Manhattan is the Bronx. For many, many years, Bronx has been a place associated with, let's say, danger, with impoverished people, and so on and so on. A place where there are some places where you shouldn't really go. However, it is also a part of history of New York, and you can find there a lot of historical traditional buildings. Here in this picture you can actually see one of the most common sites in the old architecture of New York. It is a, well, tenement house, czyli kamienica. It is a tenement house, and outside of this house you can see something which is very special, very unique for American architecture: the fire escapes, which are on the outside. In Poland, also in the whole of Europe, we don't have the tradition of building, you know, those steps, fire escape steps or stairs on the outside. However, in New York, especially in the Bronx, you can see them, and I'm pretty sure you have seen them in a lot of American movies, especially crime movies. When the police is chasing some criminals, very often the action takes place on these fire escapes. So this is a part of, you know, also popular culture, as well as the history of architecture of New York. All right, the next borough or district of New York is Brooklyn. And one of the famous objects associated with this district, with Brooklyn, is the Brooklyn Bridge. It is very characteristic. It has very nice architecture. It's easy to recognize. I would say that in America, after the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco, this is probably the second most recognizable bridge in America. So this is one of the common sights, elements of Brooklyn as well. All right, the next place in New York which is famous is the Fifth Avenue. Fifth Avenue is one of the main roads which go through, or main streets which go through New York. Of course, as you can see on both sides, it is lined with skyscrapers. It is quite, as for New York, it is quite wide street, quite a lot of space, or maybe it's just the picture, but it seems like it's a little bit wider than all the other roads. And it's an avenue, czyli aleja, so avenues are usually the main streets which have more than one lane. Here you can see it's multi-lane. And of course you can see some skyscrapers. On the left, if I'm not mistaken, it looks like it's the Empire State Building, probably the most popular, the most iconic building in New York. And in the street, you can also see the famous New York yellow cabs. You have to remember that in America, instead of taxi, they prefer to use the word cab. And the yellow cabs are quite typical and also iconic side of New York. All right, the next also iconic landmark of New York is the Statue of Liberty. The Statue of Liberty, which shows a woman who personifies the liberty, which is, you know, the most precious value for all American and probably for all people in the world. So this was the gift of the French. It was actually made in France and then shipped across the Atlantic Ocean to New York and then assembled in New York. So this is the great symbol of America, the land of freedom. What is interesting, you can see a replica of this, or another copy, of course, much smaller, in Paris, next to the Seine River. So this is actually not the only Statue of Liberty. And you probably know that tourists, visitors can climb to the top of the head of the Statue of Liberty. Actually the crown, there is some kind of viewing point. It is also possible to climb to the top of the torch. Torch is this thing that, you know, the Statue of Liberty is holding up high. I don't know if it's available for tourists. Probably not. I'm not sure about this, but it is possible to climb there. It is such an iconic object that it featured in many American movies. Probably the most recent of them was the X-Men, when there was some fight on top of the Statue of Liberty. So yes. Okay, the next place in New York which is a must-see is Central Park. This is really amazing. You know, New York is really very densely built over. There are buildings standing right one next to another. The land is incredibly expansive there, yet right in the middle of this densely, you know, populated city, crowded and cramped city, you have quite a large area, a park area, which is the favorite area for New Yorkers to have a rest, you know, to relax, to unwind. It has also featured in many American movies, especially the romantic comedies, because it's quite a romantic place. You have probably seen there are famous horse-drawn cabs, czyli takie dorożki, which you can take and have a ride around the Central Park or New York. So a lot of, you know, couples who are in love, they use Central Park for their photo sessions and so on and so on. So as you can see, it also has some pond in it, and on all sides it is lined by skyscrapers. So people who live next to the Central Park really have a great view, but of course this comes with a price. So if you want to live in a building next to the Central Park, you have to be prepared to splash out on a very expensive apartment. In the past, Central Park unfortunately was also associated with a lot of crime, but I believe this is the song of the past. Now it is rather I believe a safe place to be. All right, the next iconic building of New York is the Grand Central Station. It is a railway station, or railroad station, I should rather say, because in America they don't say railway, they say railroad. Why is it so important? Because you have to remember that America was built to a large extent by railroads. It's a large country, huge expanse of land, so traveling there, traveling to new places, discovering and settling in new places took a lot of time. So the invention and the construction of railroads in America really helped to develop this country. So it has always been so important, and the best example of this is the Grand Central Station in New York. You can see it is also a beautiful, iconic building. It has also featured in a lot of American movies. I always associate this hall, the central hall of the building, with police chasing some criminals among the crowds of passengers. So it is a famous site, nice building, nice architecture. I definitely recommend it. I believe it's worth seeing for sure. It's a piece of very good architecture and history, American history. All right, the American Museum of Natural History. This is the building that you probably recognize, or I believe you should recognize it. Why? Well, because of the extremely extremely popular series A Night at the Museum. You probably remember featuring Ben Stiller. It's the story about the American Museum of Natural History, which suddenly comes alive at night. All the exhibits of the natural history suddenly come to life and start making a terrible mess in the night. So this is the place where it all happened. So you must have seen it. This is a great museum because it shows, of course, the natural history not only of America but also of the entire world. So what is inside? Well, I think it's just enough to see the movie A Night at the Museum and you will see what is really in there. Also great architecture, as you can see, and part of the popular culture, American popular culture. So definitely a must-see point. Especially with this famous skeleton of the dinosaur inside in the main hall. I believe it is T-Rex, but yeah, I guess it is a T-Rex. All right, the next building is also probably the most famous building in America. It's the Empire State Building. This is the skyscraper which for many years was the tallest skyscraper, the tallest building in America. However, because it was built somewhere at the beginning of the 20th century, you can imagine that very quickly other much taller buildings were erected. So, but this has remained an icon of New York, a landmark. You can instantly recognize that this is the city of New York by seeing it. It has very, very nice architecture, and of course there is a viewing terrace on top of it, and also a lot of movies. The action takes place there on this viewing terrace, especially some romantic comedies, but not also. I remember the King Kong movie with the great ape climbing the building, so it has been used quite extensively in American movies by American film industry. So as I said, nowadays it is not the tallest building in America. I believe, I'm not sure about this, but I think I heard so, that after the September 11 terrorist attack on World Trade Center, when the two Twin Towers collapsed, that the Empire State Building for some time was the tallest building in New York. I'm not really sure if it's true, but it might be. Of course, in other cities there are taller buildings now. Okay, this building is amazing feat of architecture, I would say. This is probably the first skyscraper, so to say, in New York. I don't know if it's in the world, it's quite possible, but in New York. This is a building which was built, well, we could say at the corner of two streets. You can see these streets on both sides of the building. But it has quite an amazing architecture because it's in the shape of a triangle, I believe, and it's very, very narrow. And because of its shape, this building has been nicknamed the Flatiron Building, czyli budynek płaskie żelazko. Tak on się właśnie nazywa. It is extremely famous because of its amazing architecture. You can see that it really is amazing. It is not very tall. It has a little bit more than 10 floors, I think, 10 stories. I don't know exactly how tall it is. I would have to count the floors. You can do it on your own, but it's definitely amazing. So as you can see, New York is not only the modern architecture, the modern skyscrapers. There are a lot of interesting buildings from the 20th century, the beginning of the 20th century, also from the 19th century. It's not only, you know, glass and steel modern architecture. Of course, these are the most popular sites in New York. There are plenty more. I'm sure that in any tourist guidebook you will find a lot of other interesting places that will, you know, satisfy your curiosity about New York. But I definitely hope that if during holidays you have the opportunity to visit New York, you make sure you see the sites that I have shown you in this presentation. Of course, you have to remember that America is not only New York. There are a lot of other interesting cities. Unfortunately, it's a vast country, so the distances between the buildings are, between the cities, the places are quite huge, and it's not easy or cheap to move around America, but still I believe one day you will have a chance to see all those beautiful places. So I hope you have enjoyed this short presentation. On our next lesson today we will have, or I will have a presentation about the Great Britain, and especially about London, about the famous sites and things to see in London. So I hope you have enjoyed this. I hope also you'll have a great holiday, because this is today are the last two lessons in this school year, and I hope that you will have a nice and enjoyable holiday, free of COVID, of course. Thank you very much and goodbye.